Hello and good day to everybody, and what a brilliant collection. Twee, I'm going to invite you to tell us a bit about this wonderful medley that has been put together of Nazim's songs. Also to start us off today, thank you very much indeed, Twee. Off you go now.
Thank you, David. Welcome, everyone. You'll see it's actually based on some of the feedback we had after our first series of the Open Online Briefings, that you wanted a little bit of music in the beginning. I've done a little bit of a mix-up between our COVID-ready clips as well as those of Nazim and others that have been made about COVID and the strength and solidarity that we need to get through. So on the topic of Nazim, just a couple of hours ago, I believe he opened as a cultural act for one of the Partnership for Maternal and Child Health events as part of the UN General Assembly Week, which is brilliant. And they've actually made some nice animations, which Vicky Doyle, who's been working with him on, has shared in our LinkedIn community chat group. So please make sure you do watch that. And just before I hand you back to David, I'm going to launch the poll. As usual, please do share your, so you pop up on your screen the first question where you're joining from. Once you've answered that, scroll down to question 2 for your age range. And then number 3, please do share how you're feeling. This helps us get a sense of the mood of the room despite being a virtual meeting. I'll keep that open and we'll come back to that later in the session. And back to you. Thank you, David.
So Nazim performed today at a side event for the UN General Assembly organised by the Partnership for Maternal, Maternal, Newborn and Child Health, PMNCH. So I hope that Carol Preserne is on this call, because I want to give the first opportunity to make any remark to Carol Preserne. I wanted to talk about, obviously, the work of the partnership and how she's seen that evolve. If she feels like it, I'd like to talk about also some of the excitement that's happening on COVID from the global institutions in Geneva. She could use a global fund perspective or a Gavi perspective. And one of the most remarkable things is that part of the ACT accelerator, which is the accelerator for access to COVID tools, which is the part that's concerned with diagnostics, has really made something that I think is an extraordinary breakthrough with a South Korean company and with Abbott on making it possible for antigen tests to be made more widely available. That's going to be one of my themes for today, but I wanted an excuse to bring Carol in, and I wanted to chat a bit after I told her I was going to bring her in to invite her to get her thoughts. Carol, welcome.
Thank you, David. The risk of joining your briefings is you get called on really unexpectedly for things you're not at all prepared but for. So, lesson learned. About the partnership, I wasn't aware of the briefing today, but obviously partnerships, and it's one of the most clunky acronyms around, but rebranding's not on the cards. But the partnership has had a role for many years in bringing people together, and there were those who said, well, maybe partnerships have had their day and it's time for everyone to move on, because aren't these issues sort of sorted, and what's the purpose of these gatherings? But for me, the purpose of something like the partnership is simply because it's actually quite a non-political space in which these things can be discussed. And it's one of the very few parts of the system where I've seen that a discussion could be had that isn't really mixed up all the time with the realities of having to compete for funding or get your specific issue on the agenda. It's to talk about prioritization for women, children, newborns and adolescents. So I still see that partnerships have a really key role, and never more than when we've had to work in this rather weird sort of virtual way for a very long time, and we might yet for many years to come. So I don't know what the discussion on COVID was about, but I'm very glad that the partnership is still there, taking a lead role in discussing some of the many issues that are impacting well, everyone, but women and children specifically. I've been quite obsessed recently with doing some work with UNFPA, another UN agency, but obviously, like everyone, there's been severe impacts in how you're delivering services, trying to get to grips with measuring in real time things like increases in gender-based violence, MMR rates going up. We don't know quite how much and where, but bringing all these people together to talk about these issues real time is absolutely critical. On the Global Fund Gavi perspective, David, I haven't been up to date recently, but I do know that particularly in the Global Fund, there was lots of very quick reprogramming. And in fact, in UNFPA and other places too, very quick reprogramming to flexibly and agilely use the funds they got available and to call for more funding to go well beyond the sort of core issues they are dealing with to make sure that, you know, these health workers are fully protected, getting everything they need, quick testing, etc. Although quick testing in the UK is a whole different story. Sorry, I digress because of a recent experience. On the ACT Accelerator, I've not been much involved at all, but I did read with some excitement and interest about this very quick result testing that's about to come out. And David, you're going to fill us in on that, aren't you?
Yeah, try to. Well, Carol is one of the most understated people I've known, and we've known each other for quite a long time. By the way, I see Caroline Arnold, another mutual friend, is on my screen right next to Carol.
Oh, really? I couldn't see Caroline. Okay. Oh, good.
She's next to you. It's quite bizarre. If she reached out with her right hand, she'd be left. But just about Carol, she had an absolutely massive role in getting the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn and Child Health really moving up and moving strong, and really delighted. She's now, I think it's called Professor of Practice at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And it's just great what you're able to do. And thank you for just keeping this work going. If you look at your screen, I think you'll recognize some of the people who are on. You might at least recognize their names from present or past. And thank you, Carol, for keeping...
Hello, everyone, old friends and new.
...these things going. It is absolutely brilliant. And yeah, so just today's theme is going to be, how will Europe deal with COVID in the coming weeks and months? And there are so many uncertainties that we're really all looking at, that I would very much like all of you to feel ready to come in. Now, if you're not based in Europe, it doesn't matter, because the challenges being faced in Europe are not dissimilar to what Mexico is going to face, what Mexico is going to face, what Latin America, what the rest of Latin America is going to face, and what Indian subcontinent is going to face. And I will try to make sure that we have a really open and kind of intense discussion as we go through. I just did want to start about the antigen tests that have been developed through the ACT Accelerator, put together by an outfit with the acronym FIND, or FIND, and it's about new diagnostics. I've been obsessed about rapid diagnostics ever since I was made envoy, because it struck me that the one thing that's really holding up agile and adaptive responses to COVID is the sluggishness of currently available testing, the fact that all over the world, the testing systems are at capacity, that people are not getting their results back for sometimes a week. Rojan from Nepal is here. He told me that there was a huge loss of samples in Nepal, which was really, really difficult. And I've been saying, along with colleagues, that it's absolutely essential to have quick results of virus tests to know where the virus is. Because if you want to stop yourself from being caught by the virus, you have to be able to know where that virus is. If you want to get integrated local level responses that work with people and don't do things to people, you have to know where the virus is. And if you want to actually put COVID into the wider context of your national setting, you've got to know where the virus is and not what it is doing. And so I've been just really, really keen to get rapid tests available. I'm working with a number of people in different universities who are developing what's called lateral flow tests, rapid lateral flow tests, to find whole virus, ideally, or if not, bits of virus. And I'm so pleased that the Abbott's and the South Korean company, whose name I've forgotten, have now been supported to put these tests into wider circulation. There's only 120 million going to come available probably in the next 6 months. It's been quite difficult to get enough money into the system to help make the markets for these new tests. The need will be in the billions, because if you want to be in a situation where all health workers can be tested once a week or something like that very quickly and easily before they go on duty, or where all people working in residential care plus all their visitors can be tested every day, or if you want to be sure that people in meat factories and fish factories and vegetable plants and sandwich making operations can be tested, because that's where the disease tends to get stuck. You need lots and lots of tests for your workers. These are things that people are going to be able to need to be able to use very often. And if they can be put on a little stick and you can dab it in your saliva, or if necessary, you can have a thing going up your nose or down your throat and put it on the strip, it's going to be absolutely brilliant, and billions will be needed. And that will be the secret to reopening economies and restarting tourism and a whole series of other things that are necessary, because you'll be able to get an instant, within minutes, readout of whether somebody has got the virus or not. So these are the first 2 tests that have been looked at through the ACT Accelerator that are being released. I don't quite know when they're going to become available. And I am very, very keen working with a number of researchers on actually trying to adapt stick tests for HIV that were developed some years ago, the P34 protein, and use those for this virus. And there are 2 or 3 promising ones coming along. If any of you know of the odd millionaire who's got a bit of venture capital to invest, there are still people looking for quite small amounts of money, usually $1 million to $2 million, to get these things going. And this is a problem. Scott, tell us about your testing problem. Scott Knox is my absolute hero. He's dealing with the new problems with COVID in Canada, but he's got parents in the UK. What's their story, Scott?
Oh, it doesn't. I'm sure it's one and gazillion other stories from the UK, but obviously I worry from now living in Toronto in Canada, and my parents live in Oxfordshire in the UK, and my mother 3 weekends ago fell ill, and she's very much a bit of a let's not bother doctors, let's not bother, it's all stuff and nonsense, as French and Saunders used to say. And simply, when she then said to us on the Sunday she had lost her sense of taste, that's when our alarm bells rang. And so she contacted a local doctor, her GP, and on the Monday received a test, as did my father, who had a heart bypass 5 years ago. And we've been on tenterhooks, but thankfully, father absolutely fine. Mother recovered after about 3 or 4 days, but still 15 days later, we're still waiting for their test results.
Okay.
And that's, first world problems and all that. I don't think my parents were alone in that. And I'm sure there are problems elsewhere in the world that are far worse than what my folks have to deal with in sunny Oxfordshire. Thank you for asking.
Thank you, Scott. And so we are dealing with a really massive global issue with tests. In fact, the reagents for the PCR tests, the gold standard tests that are being used, are in short supply. The testing situation is stretched to the limit in France, in the UK, and in several other European countries and parts of Canada. So it is really important that these rapid, simple tests that can be done without needing electricity come on stream quickly. They will be real game changers. So you can just tell where my own energies are really, really stuck on this. I just wanted to share that. Now I want to talk about where things are in Europe, and I think it's going to be relevant to the rest of the world. First of all, I ask you please to remember that this virus is not changing. I've told you in repeated briefings, this is a pretty stable virus. Compared with flu and other viruses that tend to change over time, this one seems to be remarkably similar, week on week and month on month. It does make people ill. It does kill. It does give people a long and nasty disease if they're unlucky. Now, just look at what's happening in Madrid. Hospitals are filling up. Look at what's happening in Marseille. Hospitals are filling up. There was this hope that perhaps the new rise in cases that was happening in Europe would be something different, that there wouldn't be so many people getting sick and dying as there were in March and April. But I want to say to you, it's the same virus. It's going to occur in every location where people are moving around. Nowhere is going to be spared. The only reason why some places might be let off lighter than others is just simply luck. But the thing that will most determine how these spikes develop in the coming weeks and months is quite simply how people behave. To what extent are we, in our collective behavior, reducing opportunities for the virus to catch us and make us ill? To what extent are government bodies giving us the support we need to help stay away from the virus by, for example, enabling us to be tested and enabling us to get isolated and enabling us to trace our contacts? It's quite simple, that simple story. This morning I was asked exactly that question on some news program. They said, David, what are the things people need to do? And so I said, in the same way as I would say it to you, it's about maintaining physical distance. The majority of transmission is by droplets. It's about good face protection. There's absolutely no doubt that good quality face protection prevents you from spreading the virus, but also can reduce the likelihood that you get it from other people. It's about good hygiene, hand washing, cough etiquette, and of course, cleaning surfaces, because this virus does last on surfaces, especially if they're cold and shiny. It's about isolating ourselves when we get ill. We know that the big outbreaks in meat plants and in fish plants have tended to be nasty because workers found themselves wanting to come to work, because if they stayed away from work, they lost money. They were not able to pay their bills, pay their rent, do the remittances to their family abroad and so on. So you've got to be able to enable people to isolate when they're ill. And fifthly, you've got to protect the people who are vulnerable. Older people, people who've got other diseases, make sure they're properly looked after. Those 5 things, remember them always. Physical distancing, face protection, hygiene right across the board, self-isolation when you're sick, and protecting the people who are vulnerable. Those 5 things, if done properly, greatly reduce the likelihood that the virus will catch people and infect them, and greatly reduce the incidence of COVID. And that is the heart of getting on top of this virus. All these restrictions and instructions that are given by bosses, you may not go to the pub after 10 o'clock, or you may not meet more than 6 people. All that stuff is designed to help us to do these actions that reduce the risk that the virus is moving around. My friend John Atkinson, he's there on the screen. I can just see him, says to me, and David, you know what we want to do? We want to help people do the right thing in the right place, in the right time, right everything. We want to help people do right because they choose to do right. We don't want to be in a world where people do right because they're worried they're going to get a £10,000 fine if they don't do right. Now, there's some really tricky issues because, as we've discussed in previous briefings, if a government feels it can't trust its citizens, then that government will try to run things with instructions and limitations and rules. Now, we're all talking here about systems change. We're talking about things that are necessary to change the systems in which we live. so that our risk of getting the COVID is greatly reduced. When you do rules and instructions, and it is done in a very definite and quite authoritarian way, you're turning the situation into one that is thoroughly linear. Somebody's not doing the right thing, we're going to fine them. Somebody's not doing the right thing, we're going to close the pubs. Somebody's not doing the right thing, we're going to change the rules about meetings. We're going to make all sorts of new rules come into force. But that's not the kind of approach that we've seen being successful with COVID. If I look at what's happening in South Korea, and I'm a lot in communication with South Korea right now. I'm very lucky. I know the foreign minister. I also have just been introduced to some K-pop artists and so on. It's all very exciting. But what they tell me is they approach this as a systems issue. They look at the multiplicity of actions that are necessary. They pull them together. They get all the different groups who need to be involved, sitting together and working together. And so it's a multi-stakeholder systems approach, or what we would call a living systems approach, that's being used. And I think the same is happening in many other successful countries, particularly in East Asia, also in Germany, also in some of the European countries. And if we're going to get that right, it's much easier if we're dealing with irreducible uncertainty. It's much easier if we want to build trust with people despite that uncertainty. It's much easier if we want to help work according to principles, because we know that if we do rules and instructions, people will get fed up. People will not appreciate the underlying issues. People will gain them, people will despise them, and we will end up with a big problem on our hands. So what we've been doing over the last week, while we were developing this way of thinking, we have done, I suppose, 2 or 3 press interviews a day in the UK and other media in Europe, in the US media, all trying to make this point that this will only work if there's a systems approach where people are at the center and are the subjects and not the objects of what's going on. And if we can build some element of trust and respect into it. It's difficult because the virus is moving around very fast, and testing in Europe is not very well developed. So there's a lot of problems for decision makers when it comes to trusting people, plus the level of anger and despair is very, very high. Whether it's university students wondering what on earth the next year has in store for them, or whether it's households wondering whether they're going to be together at the end of the year, or whether it's businesses wondering whether they're going to survive because of the constant uncertainty about whether or not they'll be able to get their income. Very hard when you have that level of frustration building up. Very hard. Very hard if that's within a context of lack of trust. And so I was talking a lot to the Koreans, and they told me yesterday, you know, it's so much easier because our people trust the authorities. Same in Japan. So much easier because our people trust the authorities. Normally we have our Japanese colleague here, but he's not here. And so I want to really ask you to focus on the ongoing challenge of what on earth is going to happen over the next few months in the countries and the localities where there's not that level of trust between people and the authorities. How can we individually and collectively help to create a climate where a lot of effort is put into actually rebuilding trust? And what can we as individuals, or what can we as concerned citizens do to encourage that? And you know, the backdrop is not good. Tonight will not be a tasteful debate moderated by Mr. Wallace between the 2 contenders for the #1 job in the US. If it is, I shall completely apologize to you all, but my friends tell me it's going to be pretty nasty. Super hard to engender trust and respect and confidence in that context, but we've got no choice. We've got to go on trying to do it. It's what I'm doing in all my work at the moment, and I know all of you are doing it. And so that is our focus. I'm going to stop at that point, and I want to invite different people to come in and comment on the trajectory. We've got lots of comments have come in from, not lots, of 2 or 3. Oh no, there are more. I saw Catherine, I saw you writing a huge number. And so actually there are a lot. I'm going to let you all come in and comment. We're going to see what feelings come through. But I want to say hello to Joshua, who's doing the scribing and doing it beautifully. Joshua, in a minute, I'm going to ask you, here you go, you're showing it. If you want to tell us a little bit about what you have started to think as you've joined us. Lovely picture. Off you go, Joshua, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hi, David, and hello, everybody out there. I'm just trying to follow the flow of conversation, really. What I'm hearing is that rapid testing is essential and is essentially the game changer. And when you pair that with behavior under the headline of trust, we can really beat this thing. That's what I'm hearing.
Thank you. Do you know, as I meet with more and more of these brilliant visual scribes, I realize they have to develop a very agile mind that can create hierarchies of thought very, very quickly. And I noticed that you've really put that trust thing there. Did it take you time to work out that was going to be your central image in the thing, or was it quick?
No, David. I'm really making it up as I go along in the best possible sense. I'm improvising with what I hear from you, and I'll go back and fill in the gaps. I've got images to go with each of these keywords.
Brilliant.
But really, I'm listening out for the keywords from you.
Yeah. Everybody do. One of the things we're learning through this briefing is how these brilliant visual artists work. And the group that we're working with from Live Illustration have the most fabulous house style. So thank you, Joshua. Let's go to Twee. What's the poll telling us, please, Twee?
Well, the poll is telling us a few things. I'm just going to end that and share that with everyone now. You'll see we have most people joining from Europe, was to be expected at this time of day, and good to see a few people from the Americas. In the age range, great to see a good spread again, a wonderful 7 people under 30 today, and I see Zara, our young people's champion there today too. And then on how we're feeling. So whilst optimism and hopefulness does seem to be the one in the lead, it is only in the lead by 1, and in fact the one just behind is 11 people have selected that they feel pessimistic, frustrated, irritated, or impatient. And I think this is a very important learning for us to feel the mood in the room. And I'd just like to say that, so first of all, thank you for sharing. It's very important to be honest and share how we're feeling, not only via the poll there, but to Scott, to Megan for sharing your stories. We all feel pain, we all feel frustration, regardless of where we live in the world. And so beyond our physical health, to strengthen our immune system in case we're exposed to the virus, we have to be looking after our mental health and well-being. And like Rebecca Cantor has also said in the chat, we should continue to share and support one another. And especially times when our social well-being is restricted with the different measures around the world, we need to try a bit harder to share and learn and support one another. That's what I'll say. Thank you.
So Megan, you got your news is horrible, and I don't want to force you to speak, but I'd love it if you felt like talking, because your story is a really, really important one. I have somebody very close to me, very similar story. Please tell it and tell us what you feel about it. Megan?
Yeah, thank you, David. Yeah, it's very painful because my daughter lives with my aunt and my cousins all live in Leicester, and they decided to meet after a long time, and they said they had dinner together, and 7 of them tested positive, and apparently 2 of those of my my daughter and my cousin were taking care of my aunt, and she succumbed to COVID. She was in hospital on ventilation for about a week. Then the doctors asked them to take her back home. They said they'd done everything they could, and she just passed in the morning last weekend. So she was buried yesterday. They had to fly her back home to Zim. So yeah, that's the sad news. So yeah, I feel anxiety, and I don't know, because I don't know what's happening to all the others that tested positive. They're not going to work, but no one really has symptoms. They are still asymptomatic. So I'm hoping they get well.
Oh, Megan, so sorry. That's such a story, such an awful story. And yet, I'm afraid to tell you that it's not uncommon, that story, that young who are not ill pass it to olders who get ill and then they die. Our friend Claudia Romo, her mother died recently in Mexico City. Same story, given it by a younger person. I think it's a real tragedy. Megan, I'm also really sorry, because it sounds like you're away from home. And it's that extra thing. And as you say, you don't know what's happened to the others who are at the dinner. So stay close to us, Megan. Thank you for joining us. Where are you? Are you ringing in from Leicester, or are you ringing in from somewhere else?
No, I teach at the University of Botswana. I'm an associate professor there. I can't even travel. We're not allowed to cross borders.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, well, lots of people sending real strength to you, Megan. Last word from you before we move on. Want to give you a good word. Tell us anything else you've got in your mind.
Yeah, I just ask people to practice safe methods as prescribed by experts. People tend to relax and be casual, but I think we should try to practice safe methods. I know we need to live, but sometimes we are better trying to physically distance, because it helps.
Absolutely.
Because we feel anxiety going, I feel anxious now going out or going to work. So I'm trying to work from home like almost every day. But sometimes you're forced to go because there are things you need to do in the office. So it's hard.
And did you say you're in Gaborone, or where are you at the moment physically?
I'm in Botswana, Gaborone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in Gaborone.
Thank you for joining us from that great country. Thank you for talking to us. And please stay connected to us. We'd love to follow up with you.
Thank you, David. And thank you, everyone.
Now, Maurizio Calderon, he says, I'm going to now ask him to unmute his mic and tell us what he says, because I've got an answer to what you've said, but I'd love you to say it, Maurizio.
Yeah, first of all, hello, David. Thanks for continuing with this, enabling us to have this space. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I asked, I guess I'm not the only one that has this concern. Okay, Abbott and the coalition that they make a part of are going to come out with this sorely needed rapid diagnostic tests and so on. But the question is, okay, who is it going to be available for, right? Is it going to be another one of these stories where everybody in Europe and in the US and everybody who works for a qualified multinational organization are going to have access to these things and are going to benefit from the, from having this rapid diagnostic facility, and you are not going to see it anywhere in the least resourced world? That was my question. Because obviously when we face in Europe, obviously, the political cadres are losing their popularity contests. People are becoming more and more disenchanted with the stories that they hear from their governments. And since in Europe, not in every country, but in many countries in Europe, particularly in Spain, where I live, there is no tradition of programs of government that are meant to evolve and being implemented over a course of 10 or 15 or 20 years, but rather every 4 years, the entire universe needs to be reinvented and the wheel needs to be reinvented. You know, supposedly the new political party knows more than the last one and so on and so forth. So they need to stop everything that was being done and reinvent it, quote unquote. It's a very, there's a lot of, I think, irresponsible acting from the political cadres in many of our countries. And that has to do, I think, with the issue that they are losing the popularity contest because the virus doesn't cooperate, right? The virus is a virus that, in terms of, for example, herd immunity, it's not cooperating. Herd immunity is not happening. And there are other elements of epidemiological, what one would say, okay, what are the factors of epidemiological security for the wider population? And they are simply not there. You know, the acquired immunity appears to be for a short period of time, and so on and so on and so on. All the things that we've been finding about this virus. So the virus isn't helping. So what are we going to do? Anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you, David, for.
So thank you very much indeed. The way in which this is being done is that there are two companies. One is a South Korean company called SD Biosensor, and the other is Abbott. They are giving 20% of their production of these tests, which cost about $5 a go, to go to low and middle income countries. And they're doing it because the Gates Foundation offered them a guarantee of market size by actually offering them a grant to purchase these tests at low cost for going to developing countries. They'll be distributed through the World Health Organization. The initiative is led by the Foundation for Innovative New Diagnostics, or FIND, which is based here in Geneva. And it's an effort to try to make sure that the fear that you have will not be realized, because there will be some resources available to get this to developing countries. The demand side has been organized through the African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, based in Addis Ababa, the Clinton Health Access Initiative, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis and Malaria, and a program called Unit Aid. So, I mean, I really do hope this works. It should lead to rapid tests, 120 million of them being available for poor countries. We need a lot more, but I just want to tell you that an effort is being made, Maurizio, not to do the kind of inappropriate, inequitable approach that you've just identified. If any of you are interested, it was quite well written up in yesterday's Guardian, but there's a press release from FIND featuring Caroline Boheme, Boheme, who is in charge of that initiative. And I mean, these are small things, but you know, this is one step along the process of trying to ensure equity of access to tests and to vaccines and to treatment. I'd like to go to Gawahar Atif. Gawahar, Egyptian person who is currently in Canada, and she's in Montreal, where I read this morning, Gawahar, that Montreal has gone into confinement again. Not the whole part of the city, but quite a lot of it. So I hope you're all right and not finding it too awful. Tell us a bit about your experience with COVID testing in Montreal.
Hi, David. Always great to hear you and be inspired by your wisdom and, of course, all these wonderful talents in front of us. It's wonderful to be with you all. Oui, bonjour de Montréal. It's I personally haven't needed to be tested, touch wood, as anybody in my immediate family, but my extended community of friends have had a variety of experiences. Some places you manage to get the test done in 48 hours, and others you can wait up to 10 days. And this is in the last, say, month to 6 weeks. So I think we should have done better in Montreal. And had we done better, we may have prevented this semi-lockdown. I mean, it's red, but with caveats, allowing certain activities as schools and others to go on. So last night, a group of us went out, a small group went out to dinner, and the restaurant was fantastically organized, social distancing, tables were far apart. All the waiters were well equipped. For the first time, we had in Montreal these gas heaters that so many restaurants have invested in order that we continue to have these outdoor opportunities. And unfortunately, all of this comes to a halt tomorrow at midnight. And fine, if it has to be done, it has to be done. But many of us seem to think that it could have been prevented had there been more vigilance. The information was out there, but people continued to gather. And then, as has been mentioned here in the list of questions and some of the speakers, the whole schooling issue. Are the children asymptomatic, passing it on to their parents or to the teachers? The teachers then go somewhere, and so on and so forth. So we're in a little bit of a strange situation in Montreal. I personally feel hopeful overall, but I think we're going through a rough time, and it's going to continue maybe even beyond the 28 days that they're referring to, because the economy is going to go to pot, no question, if so many institutions can't be open. So that's my update. I wish I could have brought better news, but alhamdulillah, things could be worse, I suppose. Thank you again, David. Always good.
Go ahead. And yeah, we've got the good fortune of working quite a lot with some of the Canadian leaders on this. Particularly, I mean, the person we know best is called Karina Gould. She's the Minister for International Development in Canada, but she's also in the cabinet. And she's really very, very interesting. We're also going to be talking to the Health Minister. I think these are tricky times in Canada because, as with all other countries that are starting to get cold, it's much harder to manage the transmission risk when people are gathered together, trying to keep warm. This is going to be an issue in Montreal and in other parts of your country. Now, Scott Knox and Kathy Matthews, also continuing with our Canada theme. Scott's in Toronto. Kathy, I can't remember where you are. You'll tell us in a minute. Say this issue of schools is becoming really challenging in Canada. Cases in schools, says Scott, are increasing in Canada, no doubt in other countries as well. So what do? Do we keep our kids in school? What metrics do we use for deciding whether they should come out? And this is an area of enormous uncertainty, despite the fact that a lot of research has been done. Your point about whether or not the kids in school are actually taking the virus to other kids is one that people are quite stressed about. Zara Nichols, who's on the call, her school is still out. She's not going to school in Kenya, and it's not clear when school's going to restart. And we're inviting Zara to actually have a session, which we will encourage her and others to run for one of these briefings in the coming few weeks, in which we will talk about COVID in schools from the point of view of the kids and the teachers. And we're going to invite some teachers and children to do that session. My colleague Catherine has been doing the work. I hope you're ready for that, Zara. And I hope you're looking forward to it. I see you nodding. That's great, because I want us to have a debate. I mean, I think some of the people we're talking to in Ireland, who've got some really big and tricky issues in their homes. And of course, people in Britain, where my own family is, with a son-in-law who's a school headmaster, and then Kathy and Scott in Canada, and then in other parts of the world, the question of what to do about the risk in schools is very, very important. So Zara, we're going to be looking forward to hearing from you and your friends about what it means for you. I hope you'll feel cool about doing this. Kathy Matthews, do you want to just loosen up your mic and tell us what you're thinking about this? And after you've spoken, I'd like to come to Chris Langdon, Iman Ahmed, and Yusuf Copley. We'll have a bit of a Canada flavour, I think, today. So, Kathy, are you there? And are you able to loosen up your microphone? Yeah, you are. Give us what you're saying.
Okay, David?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. And I see there are many Canadians on the call, so
yeah.
A shout out to my fellow Canadians. And I really appreciate the opportunity, David, to keep in touch on the school matter, because it's at a point now where people and parents are starting to pull kids out. And I think the real question is, what are the metrics as Scott raised? And I know that's personal. In our family, we have older members in the family, and so the kids are virtual right now. But I think the other part of the question is, what are you pulling them out to do if the metrics are met, or as the sea rises, you decide that it's just not the risk your family wants to take. And so I think the other big question is, what's the quality of the virtual school support? And that's where there's a lot of struggle. And so pulling the kids out to have a robust virtual system is very different than pulling them out to not be supported.
So, I mean, the reality is, as you know, Kathy, that there's widespread school closure all over the world, particularly in some developing countries, according to my informants. 24 million children are estimated to be likely to drop out of school in the coming year. Rojan Dahal tells me that this is in Nepal being associated particularly with girl children coming out of school to help in fields, or in some cases actually being sold because households are just too poor. And so this is one of the few means through which they can access an income. And I think the whole issue of school, children, what's happening with children, what are the risks associated with school, why are children coming out of school, what are they doing when they come out of school? This is a massive issue. And of course, our friends in both UNICEF, the United Nations Children Fund, and UNESCO are looking at it. If Caroline Arnold is still on, here you are, Caroline. Are you inclined to unmute yourself and just give us your view as somebody who used to do education in the Aga Khan Development Network about what's happening in the education sector? I see your video's off, so maybe you're not able to unmute. But I think this is a big issue, and we are going to try to focus on it in at least 2 coming sessions. And we are producing narratives in the 4SD narrative series, all developed by Catherine, who's sitting next to me and who's done the work on what the issues are. Catherine, do you want to make any comment, please? If you,
schools in particular.
You're just on, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, the latest information on schools in terms of guidance hasn't changed since we posted the guidance on schools. WHO hasn't made any other comments. So just to reiterate their primary points, schools really need to be treated as part of a community. So when there's community transmission, schools have to be aware of that and limit the interaction they would have with the community. Sometimes that means stopping kids from going to school. Sometimes that means letting kids go to school, but not having parents drop off like they're doing in our school. But I think the point that was raised a moment ago, that all of this depends on individual family choices. If you have somebody vulnerable in your house, it matters a lot whether or not you send your kid out into school. And I think the other piece that matters is whether or not there is a homeschooling option. Yeah. Because what you don't want to do is have your kid miss a year of school. So I think it's a real struggle. And I think the point that was made earlier, that the struggle is even harder in places where the resources are low is something we should be really conscious of and thinking about all the kids who aren't going to school at all this year.
Thank you very much, Kath. And I just want to say TWE has given you the URL for the little piece that we've written on schools. When you go into it, you'll see that we try to distinguish between issues in schools for very small children and issues in schools for older kids and in universities. We see these as actually quite different, and we reviewed quite a lot of literature on this. Many of you are conscious that in the Northern Hemisphere, universities have restarted in the last 2 weeks or so. My youngest son has just started at Bath University in the UK. We are being interviewed at regular intervals now. What do we think of what's happening in Manchester, in Cardiff, in Glasgow, and then in universities in France, where the issues are all the same, that suddenly with all these students coming into university, bang, there are these big outbreaks of COVID. And there's a real risk that if you've got an outbreak of COVID in University Hall of Residence, that the students understandably will say, oh, I don't like this, and they will go back home. And they will take the virus back home with them. And that's one of the reasons why there's been rapid closure of halls of residence in different parts of the world in the last couple of weeks, actually to try to stop this centrifuge of virus going back. It's a really difficult issue for any effort to try to control a virus. We've seen it with a lot of other communicable diseases. If you give people warning that you're going to stop movement, they all depart as quickly as possible to get out, and they take the virus with them. We've seen it happen quite a lot in Europe when the earlier movement restrictions happened, and that's why they're often done suddenly, but people get very frustrated when their movement restrictions are introduced late at night with no notice. They feel cross. And you can see the dilemma. You don't want people escaping and taking the virus with them, but on the other hand, you know that they're really not going to like a sudden incarceration. Chris Langdon is here, and we love you being with us, Chris. Could you unmute yourself and just give it... this is a really important point that you brought up, and it links to this whole issue and the question of all the time trying to stop people who potentially might have virus going into places where there's not virus, and sometimes asking them to do things that are appearing to be somewhat counterintuitive. Chris.
Well, I want to bring it back to the family question, first of all, and then widen it out at the end of my very short comment. I mean, I'm really sorry, Megan, about your loss. I've just suffered 2 losses, and that's one reason why I raised this question of when family members want to engage with one another in the process of loss. This issue of the risk-reward factor is rather different from a normal situation. So my question to you was, David, what is the empirical evidence of cases, sad cases like Majan's aunt, of family members gathering and as transmission? I looked at the latest figures from the Public Health England, and I didn't see it as a major factor. It's clearly important, but I think there is this issue, and it came up with missteps within the British government today of the northeast of England now, where family members cannot meet. I'm in the south, I'm not so affected yet. But this real question beyond just my own individual family, I was reading the book by Norina Hertz, this issue of loneliness, not just as a deep emotional issue, you use the word despair, but she argues that's one reason for the divorce from normal politics. I think it's a very important point that's coming out in her new book. So this real issue of how do we have social contact, which was such an important part of us as human beings in this time of COVID. I hear the rationalists saying you have to be careful, and I absolutely understand that, and that's what I'm transmitting to my family. But I can tell you, it's really, really difficult.
Chris, I'm so sorry to hear of your losses. I'm sure that this is actually a reality for many of the people on this call. We've lost friends and relatives, and I totally find myself feeling enormously affected when you say that it's become really difficult in your family coping with the loneliness of not being able to meet and grieve properly because of anxieties about the virus. and I don't have any answers, but I hear you. Everything I'm reading tells me that weddings and funerals and parties are quite important at the moment as being venues for spreading events. They're of course not a huge number, but you only need to have a small number of spreading events where perhaps you've got 30 or so people present to really provoke quite a lot of spread of the virus. So I think authorities are really scared of this. Chris, have you resolved it in your family? Were you able to get closure on this, or are you?
No. I mean, I have two funerals, and I have one on Thursday when I'll be one of the elders in the family. I've discovered I've become an elder, slightly to my surprise. It's aging. So we will be trying to navigate this process, but it is very difficult.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Sad moments.
And I do recommend Noreen Hertz's book, which is raising this thing which isn't normally discussed, something I hadn't really thought about, but loneliness both as a phenomenon, but also as a political issue.
Could you put, I'm sure this, well, perhaps others know about it. Annie has been writing to me about aspects of this issue from a human rights perspective now for a period, and I think some of that is linked to her personal experience. That's Annie Feltham. I'd like it, Chris, if you could put that book into the chat, just to give us all a chance to see it. And I think it's super important what you're saying, loneliness as a political issue. Annie, I think you would agree with that. I would like to, in fact, Annie, do you want to say anything about that?
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I think this session is quite raw. But I'll say this, I am terrified that rationality says that I shouldn't see my 6-year-old grandson over a long period of time. And I absolutely, I mean, he's fine, he's happy, but he's in school. This, I just find this so undermining. That I'm not sure, there's no sort of thing I can say to myself, which comes back to what Chris and Magda was saying earlier on. And Stephen, oh goodness me, what's the name of the head of the NHS? Simon Stevens. He said today that isolating or shielding people on the basis of age, which is on the cards in all of these first world countries, is actually a form of apartheid. And these are very strong words, and I sort of agree with that. But I'm sitting here with my fingers really hard crossed because it's so painful. And I have no idea how you balance out risk. And you've got people like David Spiegelhalter talking about risk a lot in the UK. And just saying it's difficult. And by golly, it is when you look at it at a personal level.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you for your own willingness to let some of your raw feelings come out just in the way that Chris did just now, and also that Magen did. It's a rather special thing if this group is now sufficiently at ease as a collective not to be scared of expressing some of these things that are really tough. Thank you to all of you. Iman Ahmed's written, what do I think of testing inside pharmacies? Isn't the concept very prone to hazard? Quality control on testing is really important. Taking the sample, doing the test. I'm one of those ones who's a little bit fussy, saying, please make sure that the specialists do it. I've seen too many tests got wrong because the samples were taken wrong. I've got Yusuf Gottlieb writing saying, can COVID be dealt with in isolation from a myriad of interconnected issues related to it? I totally agree with you, Yusuf. It cannot. COVID is a revealer of so many vulnerabilities in the systems in our society. You're seeing that in Israel acutely. I know you are. And everything I read tells me you are. I mean, it must be quite dramatic right now. And yes, you say perhaps the idea of going back to normal feeds the illusion of a pandemic. Totally right. Richard Horton, editor of the Lancet Medical Journal, last week said it's not a pandemic. It's a virus that's becoming endemic. It's becoming part of our ecosystem. Ruti Besando said, is IATA or others trying to control the number of passengers on airplane flights? What happened during the upcoming holidays? There is a challenge. I mean, there's an airline industry that collectively is in incredible difficulty for lots of reasons. And at the same time, there is an absolute need to do what we can to try to protect the being infected. There is a quite stark difference of opinion among the experts as to how much risk there is on airplane flights. And it's difficult to be able to disentangle everything. So yes, together with IATA, together with the International Civil Aviation Organization, and actually together with a number of companies, this is something that we're looking at. We've not gone into it as deeply as we've gone into COVID in schools and COVID in cold factories, but it's something that we're looking at. Thank you, Ruti. Kathy Matthews says there should be a global mobilization of high school and university students to pivot to a nature core. Now I'm going to explain why this is interesting, where students take a practical year to build tree nurseries and plant trees, build solar nut panels and sea retaining walls. I'll tell you why Kathy wrote this. Kathy's got a couple of twins and she's got a pair, well, twins. Is that right? Is that correct? You talk about twins? Yes. Kathy's got twins and she brought them to a meeting that we had on nature in the United Nations last year. And Kathy, I hope the twins are in good form. I'm so pleased to see that you're recommending this. There's been a lot on nature in New York in the last few days, all building on what we did last year, inspired by you and others, and particularly inspired by the Canadian government. So I just want to say that work is still going on. Kathy, do you want to add a word or two? I know.
Thank you, David. Very, very uplifting work, both yesterday with the Leaders for Nature Pledge and the Biodiversity Summit tomorrow, the first ever Biodiversity Summit. And I really believe this, and I believe it for two reasons. The time is now. We need all hands on deck on the climate issue. And so, well, the students have extra capacity. It's a huge opportunity. They can safely tree plant with COVID and make tremendous progress and feel a sense of accomplishment and hope and camaraderie. So I don't know where to turn, David. I know you do in terms of mobilizing resources for something like this. But the second part of it is, David Brooks, the New York Times author, talks about strength of character and the opportunity he talks about in terms of how students can spend their time during COVID is one of building character. And he talks about it in terms of doing something hard. Do something really hard. Do something you wouldn't otherwise do, and don't spend your time banging your head against the wall in frustration, but go out and do something. And I think that's a wonderful life lesson for all of us during this time.
Kathy, you know that I've been working with a great group called Youth for Nature. They've actually become the embryo of a rather nice movement. I'm going to see whether or not I can pursue that. People who've got a bit more spare time because of COVID interrupting their education, are they able to get into some of this stuff, which is so relevant? Kathy, we'll follow up. I'd just like to go to Deirdre Walsh. Deirdre, I know you are the managing editor of the Journal of the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. One of your professors is also on, Professor Paul Garner. Deirdre, if you feel like saying anything, you could have almost the last word. Paul Garner, if you feel like saying anything, you could have almost the last word. And if there's anybody else from Liverpool, that great city, who wants to say anything, you could have almost the last word, because I'm going to have to drop off in just a second. Deirdre, you're still muted, so I'm assuming you're not there. Paul, you're still muted. So I'm just going to move on now to closing us. It's been a soulful and sometimes sad moment because the context is sad. Things are not exactly going in a positive direction in lots of different parts of the world right now on COVID and on other things. Kathy's just pointed out that there's something remarkable happening among world leaders who are realizing that they have to respect nature more. And we had a really amazing event organised by the United Nations Development Programme in New York that finished yesterday. And then tomorrow, there is the Biodiversity Summit organised by the UN Secretary General. And it's a great thing that nature is getting her place in the United Nations. I'm utterly committed to that. Thank you, Kathy and team, for all you have done. There is a link between getting on top of COVID and actually working for the revaluation of nature. To all of you, I thank you really for being on. I would like to just, as we close, invite Joshua just to say anything more he'd like about his drawings. And there we go. Well done. Joshua, any last words? I saw what you were doing. You're doing lots of resizing towards the end.
Yes. Yes, sorry, I didn't realize you could see that. Yeah, yes, I'm just trying to get some of these details about virtual schooling and back to nature, which I personally think is a great idea, to really use this time in the best way we can, in a really holistic way. I think is an incredibly useful and inspiring part of the discussion. Yeah. So that's really where I'm at right now.
Thank you, Joshua.
Conversation.
We're closing down. I just want to see again who's on. I'd like, as always, to give a shout out to members of my family and our team who are on. If you just like to just say a farewell word. John Atkinson, are you still on? There you are.
Yes, I'm here, and I'll just pick up on one thing that Paul Garner put into the chat that everyone got hold of, well, so many people got hold of, which is amongst all the nihilism and negativity and whatever, probably it's time for us to be adult and rise above, measured, level heads, and chins up and positive. So, you know, keep going through it. That's me.
Thank you, John, and thank you, and to Holly, who's also on for all your leadership. Kath, any last word from you?
No, just stay strong. This was a good briefing, but I think everybody needs some inspiration. So I'm glad, David, today you were the voice of inspiration for us. Thank you.
Thank you. William Nabarro, my brother, I can see you there. Any comment from yourself?
No, I've got no comment, but it was a really useful and interesting hour.
Thank you very much for joining. Twee, you might be the last on this call.
Thank you everyone for joining. We'll be back here at 8:30 a.m. Central European Time on Friday morning.
Friday morning it is. Zara, Joe, Miles, loved you all in Kenya. Looking forward to doing the school session with you all. And everybody else, thanks for being on. Chris, it's lovely to see you. I can see you there looking absolutely great. I hope you're all right. I expect you'll be up watching the debate this evening, and I hope that it goes well. And he's at Duke University, you see. And then Paul, thank you for lighting up. It's lovely to see you. Great to see that long COVID is being recognised more and more as a real thing. I hope your long COVID is getting better. Iman Ahmed, thank you for your work for Sudan and which you do both from Canada and elsewhere. Yusuf, thank you for all you're doing in Israel and the way in which you are helping people. Holly, for your leadership work with the National Health Service leaders, a wonderful time. Carlos and Veronica in Cancun, lovely to see you, and I hope everything is going well. Chris, it was great that you were able to take place. Ruti, thank you for being with us. Louisa, lovely to see you, and thank you for being in touch. Very, very, very good news indeed. I'm now going to tune out because I've got to do something else. Those of you who like the little clock behind me, yeah, there's only a few of these in the world, but who knows, we can get some more. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.